So we are continuing on in chapter 12 and kind of finishing it out today. And so last week we talked about how Abram was creating this cycle of hearing God, obeying, praising, hearing God, obeying, praising, right? And so we see that this is the start of his journey, and he's a great man of faith. And so as he goes on, he goes out into a place towards Negeb. But the thing is, something happens. Just like in life for all of us, something happens, a famine comes. And what's interesting is there's two things. First of all, he chooses to go to Egypt. Nowhere does it tell us that God tells him to go to Egypt. But because of his circumstances, he feels like Egypt is where he's supposed to go. But the thing is, God told him he would take care of him, right? He told him earlier he'd bless him, he'd take care of him, he would be all of these things, right? So he would be taken care of. But in the middle of a famine, he was like, Egypt looks better. I'm going to head there. And so we see that sometimes we think we need to take things into our own hands and not put our trust in God. Now, that doesn't say that we don't do the things that are necessary, but sometimes if God has told us to do something, we have to hold fast to that promise. So not that he's doing anything wrong per se, but he's taken a step a little bit out of putting his trust and faith in God. And so then you see this domino effect, as sin always does. It's always a domino effect. We let in a little temptation. We let in a little temptation to become sin and sin. And so as they go to Egypt, Abram's wife, Sarai, must have been one good-looking lady, because he says, please don't tell them that you're my wife. Tell them you're my sister, because they'll kill me, because in this culture, adultery was so bad that he's like, they would rather kill me and take you as your wife than to, do something else. So tell them you're my sister so that they don't know you're my wife. So we see Abram, this great man of faith. God told him to go. He's doing these things. He's being faithful. And in the midst of it, he's a man, and not a man in a man and woman sense, but a man in a humankind sense that says, I don't know if I trust you fully, so I'm going to put my own thoughts into it. And he says, do this so that we're safe. Instead of remembering the promises that God had made him, that he would be taken care of. And he says, do this. And so Sarai actually does. They see her. She must be gorgeous, because they noticed her right away, took her to the Pharaoh to become his wife. And because of that, Pharaoh's house is plagued. All of the servants are plagued. So much so that Pharaoh says, give her back. We didn't know that she was your wife. Take her. Why did you do this to me? And sends him on his way. Now, there's a couple of things in here that are important to notice. First of all, it said that that the Pharaoh gave all of the animals and camels and all this livestock to Abram, because he was like, hey, I want this lady in your family. Take this, be prosperous. And so we can see that even in the midst of sin or falling short, God still takes care of us. Because his promises don't depend on us, they depend on him and his faithfulness. And so we see that Abram's still taken care of, even though he's not doing exactly right, but God keeps his promises no matter what. So I love that. And that's the first thing to take away. The second thing is that when we step out and we make mistakes, we make sin, we actually affect more than just ourselves. And so because of Abram's sin, now the Pharaoh is dealing with these plagues because of Abram's sin. And so it's so important to remember, when we're tempted to sin, when we're tempted to fall short, not that we won't, but when we have that temptation and that thought comes, remember, like, hey, this could affect more than just me. This could affect my family. This could affect others around me. And so Pharaoh's like, get away from me. How could you do this? Why did you do this to me? And so then he sets them on their way and doesn't harm them. And so I think that's so interesting, is that God still keeps his promises, even when we don't do right. And second of all, sin has a consequence, and we have to remember that sinning is not worth it. So leave you those thoughts today. I know they're not the most fun thoughts, but they're good provoking thoughts to think about as we study. So we're going to get into as they journey on after this in chapter 13 next week.